Hey, you remember Stand to Reason? That channel with that Greg Cuckold guy with the hell fetish? Well, as it turns out, he's not the only guy making videos over there. So let's see what kind of quality content this other dude puts out.
I thought forgiveness was letting a wrongdoing go instead of requiring payback. So how is it that God can genuinely forgive us if he first required payment through Jesus?
Okay, look. Normally I prefer to get at least past the video's intro before I start pointing out things like this, but what's with how you pronounce Jesus?
Jesus.
Like really, what is that? Does anyone else on the planet pronounce it that way? It's not relevant to the video in any way at all, but I can't just let that go by without mentioning it. It's so weird.
Isn't requiring payment for sins the opposite of forgiving sins?
The opposite? No, I wouldn't say so. Not really the opposite. I think the opposite of forgiving someone would be taking revenge on them for it, or something like that. But yeah, it's pretty close to the opposite, since it's pretty much, you pissed me off, motherfucker, so pay me right now, or I'm gonna take my revenge on you. So I guess I'd have to be splitting hairs to say you're wrong.
The danger here is taking a human action, forgiving my brother for a sin he commits against me, and applying it in an identical fashion to God.
Oh, the danger is having a single definition of what forgiveness is and applying it equally in every situation, instead of holding God to one definition of forgiveness and everyone else to a second definition? Yeah, I just can't see the danger in refusing to hold double standards, man. As a matter of fact, to me, the danger seems distinctly on the side of holding double standards. And I especially don't see any danger in refusing to hold double standards when the only reason you want to hold them in the first place is for theological convenience. But as usual, I'm getting ahead of myself. I keep on confusing the people who don't watch the whole video. Watch the whole video, people. Or don't, it's really not that important. No, really, this is not one of my important videos. You don't seriously think I'm gonna bring my A game for this guy, do you? I mean, let's face it, he's no hard hitter like Abu Bakr Siddiq, so let's all just take those expectations and lower them down. Like 60 to 70%. And that's better.
True, you and I extend forgiveness, not expecting payment for the wrong others have done to us.
Yeah, we do. That's the way we're kind of obligated to do it, because that's what forgiveness is. You can't sell forgiveness, man. It's not something you would ever need to sell anyway, because it's not something that you're doing for the person you're forgiving. It's not something that really benefits them as such. It's something you do for yourself. Okay, example. Let's say someone does something by accident, like, I don't know, they run over your dog with their car, and understandably you're really mad. You know, it's an emotional reaction. Now, sure, you could say, pay me and I won't pursue legal action. Or you could even just say, pay me and I'll act like it never happened. Or in a more godlike fashion, you could say,
pay me right now if you don't want to be hurt in ways that you can't even begin to imagine.
Ooh, spooky. But none of those is forgiveness. Forgiveness only happens when you process through everything you feel about the situation, and as an example you go, you know what? It's true, that guy hurt me, but he actually had just as little control over running over my dog as I did. In fact, I bet he feels really bad about what happened too. He seemed pretty shaken up. You know what? I'm still really sad about my dog, but I'm not mad anymore. I hope that guy doesn't feel too bad about it. See, that's a really different scenario from pay me if you don't want to get hurt. And that's why forgiveness can't be a business transaction. It doesn't make any sense by definition.
And that should be easy for us to do because we know how often we wrong others in the same way.
Oh yeah? Alright, let me try to understand this with a little scenario. So, someone does something incredibly horrible, blood-curdling, awful beyond any reckoning. Like, they kidnap my kid, skin her alive, and hang her body outside my door. Okay? It's gotta be something really, really awful because it's gotta get me so pissed off that all of my reason goes out the window and I start wishing eternal torment on whoever did it, since that's the only way to make this remotely analogous to God. And of course, wishing eternal torment on someone for a finite crime is completely irrational. It's purely emotional, and ultimately pretty immoral, I would say, which is why it would have to be something extremely terrible to get me to that point. But of course, there's no way for us to create a proper analogy here without appealing to complete blubbering, straitjacket-needing, danger to ourselves and others levels of insanity, since the only sin God's pissy about is one that none of us actually committed, but that he slapped on us because some ancient relative we never met did something vaguely naughty. It'd be like if you were some hopefully unrealistically insane SJW who wanted nothing more than to round up every white person on the planet and chop their heads off because at some point in history some white people had slaves. God's basically like the most extreme form of SJW. But of course, it's even worse than that because, unlike with that example, Christian theology gives God absolutely no good reason to be angry at anyone in history, since he invented every single event that would ever happen, including all the ones that pissed him off, including Eve eating from the tree. I mean, let's face it, if any of us were that crazy, we would be locked away with good reason. But we can at least try to come up with a reason why we might feel a similarly wrathful emotion without having to achieve godlike levels of nutballery. And so back to this example, I vow that I'm going to take vengeance on this person who killed my daughter because they absolutely deserve it. At least in my opinion at the time, right? But then I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, what this guy did was pretty bad, but when I was 8 years old, I took a chocolate bar from the cupboard without my parents' permission? So really, how can I consider myself any better than this guy when I've wronged others in the same way he has? You know what? I forgive him, and I wish him all the best. That was easy. Boy, do I ever feel better. Letting go of all that negative emotion. And I frolic away, whistling a happy tune to myself. And I leave my daughter's corpse dangling outside the house for the flies to eat. That's how it works, is it? Well, I sure am glad to know that. And here I was, thinking that if someone did something that put me in that mood, I might have a hard time letting go. I was dreading the day that would ever happen. But hey, now that I know it'll be easy to feel just fine again, I guess who gives a shit?
Whenever we forgive sinners as sinners. And that means when we forgive, it is possible, even commanded to us, to just ignore the wrongness of the sin. We are called to forgive.
Man, this is already so fucking weird. It's like you have no grasp on the basic concept of what forgiveness is. It's not something you do because you were commanded to. I mean, I guess if someone puts a gun to your head and demands that you forgive them, you can try, and you can tell them you did it, and they might believe you, but that doesn't mean that they're actually capable of forcing it through threats and orders. No, there's only one way to actually do it, and that's to work through your own personal feelings for your own personal good. The point of forgiveness isn't to make it so you can avoid exacting revenge or anything like that. Ultimately, it's got nothing to do with the person you're forgiving. You don't have to forgive someone to tell them, look, all is forgiven, I'm not going to do anything back to you, just get the fuck out of here. You can do that and still hold all the bitterness and hate that you did before. But if you want to feel better yourself, if you want to stop dwelling on the negativity and move on with your life, that's where forgiveness is actually relevant. It's entirely internal. Oh, and by the way, this idea that you ignore the wrongness of the sin that you're forgiving is complete nonsense. Forgiveness does not mean pretending that no wrong was done. It means getting yourself to the point where even though you know you were wronged, you no longer hold animosity toward the person who wronged you. Man, this is crazy. Like, you think your God is commanding you to forgive, but you don't even understand what forgiveness is. So he's probably super pissed at you right now. I sure hope he pardons you, which of course he can do without forgiving you.
God's forgiveness is different because he isn't a sinner and cannot, according to Scripture, even look upon sin.
Huh. Can't look upon it, huh? Then how does he know what happens? Does he smell it? Wait, did you just come right out and say God's not omnipotent? Well, maybe not. Maybe you're saying he is omnipotent, but just a giant pussy. You know, like how some people can't look at spiders, or whatever. Sin gives them the heebie-jeebies. But hey, pro tip, if you want to do whatever you want, don't feel too nervous about jerking off in the bathroom, because it's sinful, so God can't watch.
He is the one person in the universe who can't forgive sin as a participant in it.
Aw, is that why he gets so upset when people have any fun? The poor guy, he just wants to join in. But since he's too impotent to modify himself, even just for the occasional night out, he can't. Jeez, you're almost making me feel bad for your weak-ass God here.
So his dilemma is absolutely unique. How does an absolutely holy and just God forgive sin?
Well, that's easy. He goes, I feel really irrationally angry about that Eve bitch who ate that apple that I invented her to eat. In fact, I'm so mad that I've been blaming every human on the planet for it and chucking them in my oven if they don't pay me in worship points. This really is not a healthy state of mind, is it? I'm letting it get to me way too much. Think of all the time I've spent brooding over this that I could have spent on my knitting hobby instead. I could have made so many doilies and socks. You know what, I have to let this whole thing go. And luckily, that won't be a struggle for me like it is for the humans, because I'm omnipotent. I can change my mind instantly with no effort at all. And shazam! Wait a second, what was I talking about? Whatever. Now where'd I leave my knitting needles?
How does a sinless God forgive sinners?
Well, I just explained that, Tim Barnett. Try to keep up, buddy, because I sure as hell ain't slowing down just because you listen slow. YouTube has speed controls, use them.
God forgives our sin by taking our sin upon himself.
You realize that makes no sense as a statement, right? It's like saying, I'll stop feeling angry about your murder of my child by taking your murder upon myself. It's word salad that draws carelessly the twist meat during the representative operation of necessary cooking time. And nobody got that reference, but yeah, it makes no sense at all. God or no God, either someone manages to convince himself to stop feeling pissed off, or he doesn't. Either he forgives or he doesn't. Plain and simple. It's his own issue to deal with internally, and clearly, if he's trying to hold forgiveness for ransom, he hasn't dealt with it. He still has some serious, deep-seated issues. If he didn't, people wouldn't be going to hell to receive eternal torture anymore because he wouldn't have any desire to torture people for sin anymore. And the weirdest thing of all is that considering that he knew exactly what was going to happen forever before he created the universe, and he created the universe exactly to his perfect specifications of how every single moment on that timeline would look, he should have managed to get over it long before he spoke the universe into existence. Would have saved everyone, including him, a ton of hassle. But I guess that'd require some kind of intelligence and pragmatism, which I guess is hard to have when you've been stuck in a cloud of irrational rage for a few millennia.
He forgives sinners by paying for their sins.
Oh no! You murdered my daughter, you son of a bitch! I hate you! I will have my vengeance! So who should I make the check out to?
Notice that it's the same God who demands the payment, who also pays the payment.
You really are not painting a good picture of God in this video, man. He's getting crazier by the second. So now he's like a shopkeep who rings in a customer, and he goes, "Sir, that'll be $7.77. And then he runs around to the other side of the counter, and he talks to the empty space behind the counter where he just was, and he goes, "Oh, very good, very good. I think I have exact change. Let me just, He digs around in his little coin purse, pulls out a nickel here, a dime there, and meanwhile the customer behind him is looking at him really weird, but he's like, I could go to the other store. This guy's completely nuts. He always wastes all my time. But I'm already here. I just want to get home. This probably won't take too long." And so finally the shopkeep has all the coins on the counter, and he runs back around behind his counter and counts up the coins, and he says, I'm sorry, sir, but this is only $6.66. And so he runs back around the counter and he says, I'm terribly sorry. I must have counted that wrong. Let me just, Okay, I'll stop. You get the point, right? I mean, it really sounds like God needs some psychiatric help. Maybe even some medication. But actually, it's weirder than that, because somehow he's involved us humans in his weird little self-payment scheme. And how do we fit in exactly? Because if he's just doing some weird sacrifice to pay himself, he could do that all on his own. And yet there's this whole thing of humans needing to believe it to, make the payment go through? I don't know. So the crazy shopkeep gives a local kid a few coins and he tells him, "Hey, this is for me. I need you to run around the block and give it to me, okay? I'll be really mad if you don't, because I need my money right now. So you be quick." Yeah, he sounds like a real intelligent guy.
In a similar situation, would be the way that the scriptures forbid us from taking vengeance for sins committed against us. We are forbidden to do this, again, because we are always sinners taking vengeance. We also bring injustice into our vengeance.
Well, that was incredibly awkward. It sounds like you stumbled over your poorly written lines because not only were the words you said unclear and stupid, but you also said it like it was two disconnected statements when I really don't think it was supposed to be. So let me try to clear it up for you, eh? Let's start with the sentence that I think your script probably said, or at least should have said, which is, we are forbidden from doing this because as sinners taking vengeance, we bring injustice into our vengeance. And that can mean a couple of somewhat different things. The first is a general admonition against vengeance. Because vengeance is an attack on someone who you perceive to have done you wrong, but not in order to protect others from them or to serve any other greater good, but just out of an animalistic bloodlust and the assumption that fucking their shit up will bring you satisfaction. And so it's inherently selfish and sort of masturbatory, and it's really only meant to cause more violence than there already was. Now, I kinda get this, but I also understand that the instinct for revenge exists for a reason, which is that punishment is a deterrent. If someone hurts you and you hurt them worse in return, others are gonna know not to hurt you if they know what's good for them. And the person who hurt you will know it even better, if they're even capable of hurting anyone once you're done with them. But this leads me into the second possible meaning of what I think you were trying to say. You mentioned that we bring injustice into our vengeance. This is a really interesting phrase because it implies that any injustice that occurs isn't due to the selfish and savage nature of vengeance itself, but due to some flaw in how we carry it out. What could that mean? Well, it could mean that humans can take vengeance without having all the facts, which we as a society recognize, and which is why we've developed a justice system designed to prevent vigilantism and to emphasize due process. Certainly the injustice of taking vengeance on the wrong person doesn't happen every time, and the injustice of taking excessive vengeance against someone also doesn't happen every time, but you didn't say it happens every time. You just said it happens. So it could be that you're trying to express the need to leave the dealing of justice to someone who has all the facts, because that at least makes sense in principle, regardless of the fact that the sense of it goes straight out the window when we remember that the person you're appealing to as the most informed judge is God. Oh, and the fact that the whole point of having a justice system is to coolly evaluate the best way to protect society, not to exact savage vengeance by proxy on someone who has no ability to reoffend or hurt anyone ever again, which is the case with the whole eternal torment afterlife thing, which can have no just purpose, and can only possibly serve to satisfy the bestial bloodlust of your god. Oh, what the hell, maybe all you're saying is that the savage satisfaction of vengeance is bad when we do it because we're sinners, but it's awesome for God because he can do any sinful thing he wants, and it doesn't count as sin because he's God. Actually, that probably is what you meant. I have this bad habit of trying to find reasonable interpretations for what you Christian dudes say, but honestly, if you believed reasonable things, or like even remotely consistent things, then, well, you wouldn't believe any of your things.
But just because God forbids us from taking vengeance doesn't mean it's wrong for him to take vengeance.
Okay, so, do you have any reasoning for that? Spoiler warning, you don't have any reasoning for that.
You can say anything you want, but giving us good reason to believe it, that's something else entirely. And that's your job to do. It's not my job to refute it.
After this, you jump straight into some other bullshit and leave this assertion entirely undefended, like as if you didn't anticipate any of the incredibly obvious questions it raises, the very most obvious being, why? Kind of an important question to answer preemptively, you would think, if you want people to actually accept your advice here, but I guess you really didn't want to crack the 3-minute mark on this video, eh? That'd blow right past the attention span of 90% of your audience. I want quick and easy answers, damn it! If your religion can't keep the answers under 3 minutes, I'm switching to one that can. So, okay, let me try to puzzle through it on your behalf if you're not going to explain it. So, we as sinners bring injustice into our vengeance. You didn't bother to tell us how, you just expected us to know exactly what you meant without so much as a hint. So I'm going to go with the animal instinct to lust for blood instead of trying to forgive is unchristian kind of angle. I really think that one's the most likely. But then you say, just because God forbids us from taking vengeance doesn't mean it's wrong for him to take vengeance. And why is that? Well, it's the same answer to most of these conundrums in monotheistic religions. 3 little words. Might makes right. Plain and simple. You can't do the things God says are bad because you're not God. But God can do whatever he wants because he's God. And if what he does matches the definition of something that's defined as sinful, well, fuck definitions. He's God. Definitions don't apply to what he does. He gets his own dictionary. Which I think is why you said this vengeance thing is a similar concept to the forgiveness thing, and why you brought it up at all.
In a similar situation would be the way that the scriptures forbid us from taking vengeance for sins committed against us.
And despite the word meaning that you'll no longer wish for vengeance once you've forgiven, God can totally forgive and yet still demand payment and exact vengeance if he doesn't get it. And similarly, even though vengeance is a selfish act of lust and sinful by nature, to the point that humans are apparently forbidden by scripture from doing it at all, when God does it, it's a shining example of righteousness and holiness. His own standards be damned, because he's God, so he can kick your ass for all eternity if you object to his double standards. And somehow, despite believing that this mythology is an accurate description of reality, you managed to talk about it without even once wiping that big dumbass smile off your dumb little face.
In fact, and this relates to forgiveness, the only reason we can forgive sin and not take vengeance is we can rest in the fact that the price of sin has already been paid and will finally be judged when Jesus comes again.
Really? You have got to be kidding me. So, if you stop believing all this Jesus nonsense tomorrow, you would never forgive anyone ever again, and you would take vengeance on every person you ever perceive to have wronged you. Because why? You think wrongdoings have a price tag of pain? And if some third party hasn't already beaten himself to symbolically pay the price, you have to kick the shit out of everyone to make them pay? And so no atheist or non-Christian ever forgave anyone because we don't believe that the price of sin has been paid or even exists in the first place. That's one of the most willfully ignorant statements I've ever heard in my life. Ignorant in the sense of lacking knowledge. Like, did your parents raise you in a closet and never let you out until you were 20, or what? How can you possibly hold an opinion like that after actually living in the world and interacting with human beings? I don't get it. Wait, though, if you really believe that, then that means that you... Holy shit. So you're like some psycho just ready to go off like a nuclear bomb if anyone ever manages to make you question your theology, eh? Man, you've got some, issues. Yeah, hey, Tim, just forget everything I said, okay? Just stay Christian, pal. Nothing you said in this video was blatantly inconsistent, lazy excuse-making in any way at all. No. It all made perfect sense, so keep believing, and please do not take vengeance on me for this video, okay? The blood price has been paid, please!
This is why it is simply impossible to always make parallel cases for what we are called to do as creatures and what God must do as creator.
What God must do. Well, that's interesting. Who's telling God what he must do? I thought the whole point was he's God, you know? He can do whatever he, No, never mind. All makes sense. Nothing wrong here. Great theology, man. Totally coherent. Yep. So, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna go and, not talk to you anymore. For my own safety. So, subscribe and, like the video so you can see future ones and support me on Patreon. Here are the $5 people who get to appear in the list of $5 people. That was weird. And also, they get videos a day early, and, all my Patreon and PayPal people are really, really great. And now if you guys will excuse me, I'm just gonna back away very, very slowly. Bye.
The gospel is offensive enough, we don't need to add offense to it.